just paint. With this image, this is part of the Just Paint series. What we're going to do is we're going to start with an image. So I've taken a photo of the mountains with a tree line and everything else in the front. Now, bear in mind, the finished painting is not going to really look like that. We're not after the realism, we're after the abstract, and so we're going to abstract that particular view. Okay, first we're going to start off laying down some little bit of line so we have something to go by. You can use a pencil, or with Terps, mix just a little bit of brown in it so it's nice and thin. Ideally, what you want to do is draw down your first line. That's probably the line where the mountains are going to go. All right, your second line could be for your tree line. And got to remember, these are just rough lines. And then we have a little area in there that's going to be a different color. All right, so once again, just a little bit of brown. We find our mountain points. And just roughly draw them in. Okay, now we're going to use a 1-inch wide brush to start everything off. We're going to start with our sky, so we'll load up the palette with some of the colors that we want. Now, we know that that's a blue sky with clouds. Kind of boring. I like red. So reds and magenta, as well as some purples, will turn into a sunrise sunset. So we need some reds, nice reds, some purples, some magentas, and some yellows. We're going to use a light wash technique. So it's not going to be very thick paint. We're not going to worry about much of anything. We're just going to lay down some color. Any which way. We're not going to worry about anything else. Making sure we use lots and lots of Terps. Then we use a piece of paper towel to dry off our brush. Then we grab another stiffer 1-inch brush for blending. And we go right to the yellows. We put the yellows in. We're not worried about drips. And you notice we're not being overly careful about how we're laying down the paint. All we want to make sure we're doing is coming down and at least touching our line. Now we go to the white and start blending it all in. Cover the edges of the canvas. That helps get rid of the excess paint on the brush as well. And make sure we have Terps. And we just wash it in. The other advantage, of course, of doing up the edges is it gives a nice finish to the painting no matter how it's going to be framed. And we add a little bit more white to soften the line, soften the colors a little bit. And go to a deeper red. Technique is called wet on wet. Once again, clean your brushes as often as you need to. And we start laying in some yellow. Now we look for a different style of brush. It's a fan brush. I'll use some more yellow. And we just use the tips. Create a little extra color through all the red. Little fine streaks. Okay, now we go back to some white and see if we can put just a bit of clouding in there. So again, just poke it right in just with the tips. The idea is not to spend a lot of time thinking about what you're doing. Just paint. Now, I'm going to improve some of the stuff with some palette lines. Alright, what we're going to do is drag some of the colors around. So we'll keep adding colors to it until I like the effect. What I'm going to do is try and work some of those edges in. Nice and gentle. Put a little white on the brush. This is using a brush almost like you use a palette knife. And see if we can just, with a fan brush, try and finalize some of the lines. Now still cleaning up some of the lines where the mountains are going to intersect with a palette knife. What we do is just work it in. Okay, now we're pretty much done with the sky for now. So we want to add blue-gray for the mountains themselves. So we use a little painter's gray and a whole lot of white. Do a real rough mix. Just to seat some of the edges. Rough outlines for how and where we want the mountain to be. And that ends up being the top of the mountains. Roughly. Do more work to those in a minute. Right now, we'll clean up the brush a little bit. We'll mix mostly white in with a little bit of the gray. And just fill in some of the back color. And there's our background roughly done out. Take a little extra brown. We add the brown in for toning. Once again, using a palette knife. Give it a rough texture. Now there's a lot of white in the mountains. So we're going to add white. Take your time. Just put on enough color to make you satisfied. That's roughly your mountain range. You can correct the little minor details in it later. Now we're going to start is in this area down here, and in the picture it's kind of got a reddish sort of brown to it. So what we'll start off is with a lighter color. This is technically a yellow, and look for a brush. Here's one, looks good enough. And we just do a light wash of color. This means we mix a fair amount of terps into it and just spread it so it covers the canvas and gives the canvas some coloring. not so much that it's thickly painted. And that gives us our basis for that brown section in the bottom. Now we're going to use a fan brush for our trees, because they're kind of really feathery anyways. So we take a nice dark green, and we start just laying in a little bit of line in there. So lay down a little bit of green background, nice and light. Okay, now we go back to this brush and we start laying in a bit more of the tree. There are colors for the tree. I don't like that, so what I do is get most of it off. Back to the brown, put a little brown in. There, move over to our green. For the bottom, we have a special red, sometimes called an Indian red. White. Just a little bit. Give it a little green. We can show that spring's starting to try and come alive. Take our tree line and we drag it down and in. Okay, now we're going to do a couple little corrections in the mountains. So what we want is some painter's gray.
and it's done.